Welcome everyone to today's Performance Clinic, a tutorial on SRE-Driven performance engineering with Neotys and Dynatrace. This is part of my Performance Clinic series. And if you have an interest to watch this later or others, you see the link, the bit.ly link that gets you to YouTube. The recording will obviously be available as well for on demand. You can just use the same link that you registered for, or you'll find it on university.dynatrace.com. If you want to try Dynatrace, you can obviously sign up for the SaaS trial. If you want to try Neotys, which we'll see later on, you can also go to their website. And also there's a podcast called Pure Performance that I want to highlight you to, that I'm running with my colleague Brian Wilson. Now, my guest of honor today, we've been friends for a couple of years now, Henrik. And Henrik, maybe, quick introduction for those people that have so far escaped you in the performance engineering scene.
So my name is Henrik Rexed. I like to cook. I like also to enjoy my private lifetime. So that's why we build integration to save time and enjoy the weekends. That's the idea between the today's theme. You see that we are a bit in a hurry. Otherwise, I work from Neotys since 10 years now. And I build integrations and plugins and prototype for Neotys. And you can also hear me on various conferences, and the next one will happen soon, in the 7th on the 8th of October. So it's not this one, because this one was last year's virtual pack. This year it's going to be the Jurassic pack. So I don't know if you're going to see that. This is my new business card with the Jurassic pack. Yeah, I don't see it. So that's the theme is been announced, and if you want to learn more, it will be more on the social networks, Twitter and LinkedIn, so you will learn more about the conference. Otherwise, my official title on LinkedIn is Performance Archaeologist. I just changed it recently to the Jurassic Pack as well.
Very cool. So let's get started. A reminder for everyone that is live, you can ask questions. Please use the Q&A feature. I will try to moderate as good as possible throughout the webinar, but we'll have dedicated time at the end. Also, for those that just joined live, we have a live polling going on, picking 3 questions out of the State of Performance Engineering report, which brings me to, first of all, I want to bring Henrik back in his full beauty, the Lego Henrik. I know you like to use this one compared to your regular headshot. So here we go. Here you have your Lego Henrik back.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. But really, so let's kick this off before we go into a live demo and talk about how we think performance engineering has to evolve. State of Performance Engineering in 2020, we gave you 3 questions in the live poll. And when I read it, and when Henrik made me aware of that report, and I browsed through it, by the way, all of you can get the report on the link on the bottom. I thought there were some interesting observations and interesting things that I thought are, it seems, Henrik, we're not yet doing a good job in advocating and changing the world, because you can read for yourself if the biggest challenge is still the lack of communication between IT and business. Well, this is nothing we can solve with the next integration. These are cultural changes that need to happen, but the others, I think, are things that we can make easier by building and also providing the right tool and education. But for me, it's sad that only, let's say, 15% correlate application performance with business metrics, which I think is important, because otherwise, when we are optimizing and we are testing and we don't talk with the business about what's actually important for them, then maybe we optimize and test for something that might look good on our load testing reports, but may have no real business impact. So, I mean, Henrik, I know you've worked with the report. Any other conclusions on the state and where we are right now from your end?
I think there are various stuff. I mean, in terms of things that are quite shocking to look at them in terms of numbers. First, you highlight them. So first, 67% of people is still using COEs, and I'm pretty convinced that COE performance COE is going to die soon. There's still a need, but it doesn't fit with modern organizations, Agile and DevOps. But also there's another thing which has surprised me quite a bit, is the expectation of response times, where most of the project tolerates response time between 5 to 10 seconds for their internal app, but it's quite weird because the same person that tolerate that type of thresholds would be probably a demanding user when it comes to using public web pages, or mobile apps. So if I'm sure that he has a response times above 2 seconds, it's been frustrating. So why do we accept bad response times for our app when we are very demanding on other websites? So I think that surprised myself. That normally as a standard, performance is important, so you should be more demanding by what we are building.
Agree. Yeah. And folks that are listening in, please make sure to check out the report. Henrik also just posted the link from the bottom into the chat window. If you're watching this offline, it should be easy for you to type it in or just search in your search engine. Really interesting findings. Now, Henrik, another observation that I have made is that we've been talking about shift left a lot over the last couple of years, right? I think the industry term is catching on and has been, a lot of people have invested. They've invested in delivery pipelines where the automated deployment, and they also start to automate some tests. But then it feels like we're still spending a lot of time in approving the build, because we need to then manually reach out to these tools. So somebody sits there and needs to figure out, okay, is this actually, does my Selenium test it fails, or my functional test it fails actually, is this good or bad? And I think one of the problems that we also have here is that sometimes we seem to have tests that we just built for creating great test coverage maybe, but we don't really know which business use case is this really supporting, and how important is this business use case, and if this test fails, how relevant this is for the overall build validation or deployment validation. And then fortunately now you are working for Neotys, and we have great tools, and people are more and more integrating these tools, these performance testing tools, into pipelines. But yet it seems a lot of these tools, obviously excluding Neoload now, a lot of these tools make it hard to then really compare, and like, what metrics do we compare and how do we compare? I still know of people that are copying and pasting their test results into an Excel file, sending it over to somebody else, and then they are comparing things. I mean, these are things that should not happen anymore, because it just takes time. And the last thing that obviously is great for us is Dynatrace. We see more and more people integrating monitoring data, or using monitoring in their test environments, in their pre-prod, in their staging environments. However, people are often getting overwhelmed. There's now even more data, and it's even harder to figure out what is the relevant data, which are the ones where they're relevant for my business transactions. I'm actually testing my business transactions? It all comes back also the combination of the right tests that are important for the business, then running them under not only functional tests, but also performance, and then also connecting it with monitoring, connecting everything together, because otherwise you have just a lot of data that's unstructured and you don't really know what's happening. So Henrik, this is an observation that I make. And
yeah, and I think when you start automating, I think there's a big problem as of now. If you run a test with load testing, and then you get a failed status, then you start analyzing, you start putting resources and expertise there, and then you figure out that it's just an environment and deployment problem. I think the status that comes out of the testing tools today doesn't help us to make the right decision. We don't trust what's coming out of automation, and that's why people are inventing very complex process and to analyze with third-party tools and others to trust what's come from the automation. So I think there'll be a big problem here, and I'm pretty glad that today we're going to give tips on how to avoid this today.
Exactly. So that's why trends and initiatives we're seeing. And again, the first one is again taken from the State of Performance Engineering report. I picked a couple of trends and metrics from questions that I think come in a little later in the report on what are people investing in, right? Say it again?
It's a chapter 5, the last section.
Yeah. So I think that, the top trend is, I think, clear, right? Cloud and microservices are going to reshape performance engineering. I think we see this, and also DevOps. We said this earlier. We need to think about enabling teams and mentorship when it comes to performance engineering, so that more people can get performance feedback faster on smaller components. It's very great to see that 56% are interested in implementing what I think what in the report is called zero touch performance as a self-service. And this is what both of us, we've been promoting. How can we provide performance feedback as a self-service without always having to go to the expert, the center of excellence, so that they can set up the test environment, run the test, and come back with a report. And it seems people are moving into the right direction. I would have hoped, though, that this would have already been addressed much earlier, not in 2020, but still great to see that people are moving into the right direction. Right. Also, the last thing here, the 53 people want to rate apps trustworthiness with a score through the life cycle. And I think the score this is something we've also introduced with Captain, which we will talk about later a little bit with the quality gates, where we are calculating a total score for every new deployment, for every new artifact that you can then take and track it throughout the delivery pipeline and making better decisions on top of this. Now, a big topic here is business metrics. So bringing business and IT together. And here is, Henrik, something I need to bring up from a recent performance clinic I did. Because just as you, right, we are more on the IT side, on the technical side, performance engineers. I'm interested in metrics like response time, number of service calls, number of database calls, memory utilization. So very, let's say, technical metrics. But a couple of weeks ago, I did a webinar, performance clinic with Klaus, whom you know as well. And Klaus comes more from the business side. And he says, you know what, if this is your definition of done, then you completely miss what I'm interested in from the business side. Because while I'm interested in service level objectives, looking at things that a service produces and how well a service is from a quality perspective, he thinks from a business side, things like bounce rates, campaign adoption rates, page load times, click frequencies. There's many things, app ratings in the App Store, right? There's a lot of these metrics, and it seems that if you look at these two sides, we clearly have a different perspective on the view of what we actually consider to be the goal of what we want to achieve with that release, right? And I think that's a big challenge. We have different points of view, and it seems that to the business enough. So the question is, how can we break this wall? And the also taken from this webinar, and in case you're interested in watching it, I think the easier way is probably to go to the YouTube channel that I have and then search for business metrics. He said, we need to get these two sides together, because in the end, we need to look at both the more technical metrics, but also at the business metrics, because the business metrics in the end are the ones that are really counting. And Henrik, now back to the report, which I thought, and I took this out because this was a great graph on how business really has to be center stage. Everything we do, we need to make sure that we have business in mind. I know the title on top, it might be a little provocative for some people that are listening in, but I also took it. You told me about that.
Yeah, so we slightly changed the quote, say performance is too important to be left to engineers alone. Mm-hmm. And I think it makes sense. I mean, especially with what happened, the current situation with COVID-19. I mean, the increase of usage of internal apps or public-facing apps is just insane. So performance is definitely part of a real important part of the organization. So we should definitely take it as some one of the pillars that will make the business successful. So that's why I think a performance engineer alone cannot do it. You need obviously to have the business involved to drive what are the BLO that are meaningful, and then translate it and put it on the process. Mm-hmm. And I think there's I'm going to spoil everything, but if you want to reach out to this mature approach of dealing it, there's a clear organization to have there. So we're not going to talk about it, but if you want to learn more, I'll let you read the report later on. Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a lot of topics around it, right? And I think in order to get better, right, just putting a graph on a slide that talks about design for performance, develop for performance, test and monitor for performance. I think there's a lot of things that people have already started doing, but I believe if we really want to get better in our practice, if we want to include business, if we want to enable everyone, then here are a couple of areas I think we all need to improve on. And it starts with, and I start with now, data democratization, meaning making data and feedback available to everyone, being very transparent, because if you do this, I think you also start trusting the data. Once you see that, hey, this data comes in on a regular basis, I know exactly how I'm measuring up against my business goals. If you do continuous evaluations as part of your delivery cycle, this is where automation comes in. Self-service is a big thing, right? Everybody should get the feedback that they need of data that is relevant, that also links to data that is relevant maybe for other stakeholders. They have to have this data. We mentioned shift-left earlier. That's about integrating these measurements and validations in the delivery cycle. Now, on the top, we see SRE, SLIs, SLOs, SLAs. This is also part of the title of our webinar today. And also BLOs, because the SXO, so the SLXs are more service level, so more, I would say, a lot of technical metrics, where the BLOs are the business metrics that I explained earlier, that Klaus mentioned. And what you will show later on in the demos is the whole concept of everything as code is really important. Enabling and giving everyone access to the tool and the tools and the services in a declarative way that can then be version controlled, that can be triggered and used for automation. I think that's key here. Henrik, so when were you introduced to SRE and SLIs and SLOs? How long? It's been a while since it's been around, but
2 or 3 years, I think now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been introduced by the book that Google delivered a few years back.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is great, and I think you opened my eyes when you mentioned Kayenta. So Kayenta was a great initiative, and I think Captain sort of been inspired by that Kayenta approach.
Exactly. But for those people that may be new to that terminology, just a quick primer. SLIs stands for service level indicators. To keep it easy, it's basically something that you can measure, like the error rate of, you'd say, your login transaction. And SLO is the objective that you have, how that metric should behave in a relevant environment. Let's say in production, the error rate should be less than 2% over a 30 period of time. Otherwise, you may have issues with, not many people can log in. Now, an SLA, and this is a term that more people are probably familiar with, is very similar to an SLO, but I think it's basically where you have an SLO with a business agreement or with a contract to your customer, a third party, where you are legally binded or where your business depends on that you're delivering a certain level of quality. Right? And I didn't come up with this. So as you mentioned, Google has a great book about it. There's also a great video, and this is where I took this information. You can find it on YouTube. It's called SLIs, SLOs, SLAs, Oh My. And they explain it pretty well. The top says it, I think clearly, SLIs drive SLOs, which inform your SLAs. So the idea is that we need to make sure we understand what are the business binding criteria and how can we break it into objectives that we can definitely meet in production so we don't have any negative business impact, and what are the individual metrics we need for that to measure it. And what we see a lot is that these concepts are obviously used in production. So you can define your SLOs with your monitoring tool, like in this case with Dynatrace. You get your metrics, and the idea is that you specify both technical and business metrics, whether it's throughput, response time, failure rate, user adoption, bounce rates, conversion rates, and you typically monitor them and report them, especially also on a monthly basis. You can do this for individual services, for applications, and so on. But what we think from a performance engineering perspective, while this is great that we have a kind of a de facto standard here with the terminologies SLIs and SLOs, even though it's in the end, it's just a metric compared against the threshold over a certain period of time. We think for performance engineering, we need to adapt this and bring it left and finally really get to shifting left, which means analyzing the same metrics that are later relevant in production, but analyzing them early on, integrated in continuous delivery, fully automated as a self-service. So every time when developers make a code change, not only do you want to deploy and you run your tests, but have your pipeline, your delivery tools automatically validate the metrics, the SLIs that are important for you later on in production. You obviously need to break them down, maybe add a couple because there might be more technical metrics that then impact the business metric. But the idea is if you do this with every commit, if possible, then you get early warning indicators, early feedback, so that engineers can react early on potential problems before it goes into production where it really hurts, right? And obviously this can be done in any with any service, with any application. It can be done with your classical monoliths, and it can also be done obviously with your cloud natives. But the perfect thing here is this is something we need to think about. This is something we have to establish.
And also just to add is that performance testing tools, like mentioned before, we don't rely on the status because the way we manage the requirements most of the time is based on SLA, and you mentioned it. Mm-hmm. Usually SLI drive SLOs that drive SLAs, and here it's mainly a list of SLAs. So and as performance engineers, you probably know that the evaluation of a test that is positive or that has failed is based on many indicators, many objectives, not only one. Mm-hmm. So I think the SLA's approach doesn't work. It doesn't fit, and that's why we are getting that problem that we were just that Andy explained at the beginning of the webinar, where people have to manually analyze the test results because of those SLAs, which doesn't make sense. I think SLI, SLO, and SLA is the clear answer to make the analysis or to generate a status, a realistic status out of your test.
Exactly. And so I think what we need to work on, and this is also what we're going to see later on, we need to work on getting the relevant metrics, the relevant SLIs and SLOs into the hands of everyone involved in the delivery. That's the engineer, the tester, the business analyst, everyone, right? And whether this includes more technical metrics or business metrics, in the end, it has to be something that basically gives everyone an overview of how are we currently doing. And one starting point is obviously a dashboard, but then the next step would be to even automate the analysis and looking at this dashboard to make a clear go or no-go decision. But actually, this is a dashboard here that I have that we'll see later in the demo from Henrik, where we have test metrics, business metrics, service metrics, and infrastructure metrics. So SLIs in one view every time we push through a new version of a service. So I think this is where we need to go. Now, step one is SRE-driven performance engineering. So the first step before we go to the full automation in the pipeline is just making performance engineering easier. And this is where over the last couple of years, Henrik, your teams, our teams have worked very closely together to integrate our products to really enable our customers to break these COE walls and enable more people within the organization to become performance experts. I really like the top right, where it was an organization, they had 14 experts in a COE team, but then they broke it up and now they have 90 auditors. So these are just regular engineers that can also leverage our performance engineering integration and feedback from running the test and then analyzing it with Dynatrace without having to have an expert on their hand that in the end becomes a bottleneck. I think this is very important, right? Our value prop here. What we built, in case you have not seen it, and I think, Henrik, we did a webinar that goes into very much detail on what the integration actually does and what it actually brings to the table. So we have Dynatrace monitoring. We have, whenever Neoload is running a test, Neoload tells Dynatrace when the test launches. So Dynatrace has the context, which immediately allows everyone in Dynatrace to say, show me what's wrong with this particular test, thanks to the automated hotspot analysis. And if we do this for every test, 185, 186, 187, then everyone can easily also say, so what are the differences? Because Dynatrace takes care of the analysis and comparing these two things and tell you what the difference is. Now, the other thing that we worked on, and again, this is stuff we show in the demo, Single dashboard is great. So we have two options. Either we bring the Neoload data, the load testing data, into Dynatrace, so that you have one view where you can see both data from the testing tool plus the full stack that Dynatrace provides, or we can also do it the other way around. I think this was very important for us, that you can bring the data in both directions, because every tool has its benefits for certain people, for certain use cases. So we wanted to make sure that this data lives in both sides. What's very cool for me, and I think, Henrik, this is where you are the first one in the industry that is leveraging this, is taking advantage of our automated root cause detection, our AI. But you do it in such a great way that typically our AI learns behavior in production environments. But in testing environments, we don't have long-term behavior, right? Because you run a test here, run a test there, but you have certain objectives. You have SLOs. And what you actually do, you allow your users to define what their expectations are, their SLOs, push them as so-called anomaly rules to Dynatrace, so that the Davis AI actually is aware of these rules as you're running your test. While you run a test and Dynatrace then detects there is an anomaly, you're not meeting your SLOs, Dynatrace opens up a problem, which then does two things. It reports back to the performance test saying, hey, there's already a problem, as we are maybe only 10, 15 minutes into the test. There's no need anymore to run the whole test because we already have an issue. And it gives you the full root stack of root cause analysis in Dynatrace as well. I think that's pretty cool. And I know this is the secret sauce now, Henrik. I think this is what you wanted to talk about in order for this integration to actually work, because this is you're the mastermind behind this.
Yeah, so I think what I really like about the integration is when you test a service where you're usually, I mean, first of all, the core basics of Dynatrace, to remind it, is based on tags. So we didn't mention that, but the integration is highly related on tags. Mm-hmm. So if you want to take advantage of the Dynatrace integration, you need a tag of the entry point. So the entry point is basically, I have a service and I'm going to send some request against that service. And so that's the entry point. So if I have a tag, so here in our example is environment application sockshop. So you will specify that in Neoload. But then obviously when you do load testing, you don't want to monitor only that service. You want to understand where you have problems. So in order to let Neoload grab the rest of the metrics coming from all the services and dependencies, then Neoload at the beginning of the test, what he does, he is taking advantage of the Smartscape. So he says, hey, Dynatrace, could you please tell me what are the dependencies of that sockshop frontend? And then Dynatrace said, hey, I have Node.js microservices. And then we do the same thing for Node.js. Hey, Node.js, do you have a dependency? Yes, I have. It's called wing service. And we do that until we reach out to the bottom of the architecture. So we do that for the services, we do that for the process, and we do that for the hosts. And at the end of the day, in order to collect metrics, we are placing a technical tag. So it's not the tag that you're seeing at the moment here in the screen, it's another tag. So we are placing the tags everywhere on the services, on the process, on the hosts, and that allows us to grab back the metrics when we do the monitoring. Mm-hmm. The second thing we do is that if you have defined anomaly rules in Neoload, then we're going to push those rules in Dynatrace and based on the tags as well. So if you have global rules, then we're going to place those on every services that has the technical tag that we just created. The other thing we do at the end of the test, we want, of course, to notify either Dynatrace user or release managers or whatever it is that at that specific timeline, there were a test running with the URL and all the informations. And that will be pushed to hosts, processes, services, every entity that has our technical tag. By the way, events are pretty powerful because you can do comparison as well. So it's a source for a lot of diagnosis tools that you have in Dynatrace. Tag, of course, by tagging means when I send some traffic, I want Dynatrace to recognize that it's a synthetic traffic requests. So we're going to add automatically in our headers some key and values that to identify that this is the user 1, scenario B, whatever. So we do that automatically, and we are configuring Dynatrace at the beginning of the test. So the rules to let Dynatrace understand that that's the Neoload traffic, we create it for you. And also thing that I think is I like that feature is we rename the traffic. So why do we rename the traffic? by default, Dynatrace name the traffic based on the URL. So if I have a URL called /cart, then by default, Dynatrace will name the traffic by the URL. What we were asking Dynatrace gently at the beginning of the test, say, hey, every traffic that comes in Dynatrace and that are coming from Neoload, please rename the traffic. And the syntax to rename it is going to be name of your user path, so user path for us is use case, name of the transaction, and then the URL. So which means when you see that naming in Dynatrace, you know and you are 100% sure that you are looking at only at the traffic of Neoload. And then which means you can launch any diagnosis tools without having the need to filter or losing time, in fact. That's the idea. And the thing that we are missing and that we're going to add, I am going to have the missing bullet in our tool. So the missing bullet is an API. So we will have an inbound, an external event API in our platform, which means we are planning to scan Dynatrace on the problems. So if Dynatrace recognize that there are problems that has been opened, then we're going to report them in Neoload with a URL. So then if you see something in Neoload, then you can click on it, you will jump back in Dynatrace, you will do the diagnosis. Those are small things, but small things that if you align all those small things, that at the end of the day, you have saved a tremendous amount of time, and then you can start enjoying your time.
Pretty cool. And again, you are taking full advantage of everything we've built on our end, and it's great to see this collaboration working out like this. So that really makes us the strongest bidirectional integration in the market, right?
It is. It is. And there is more to come. We'll see.
Yeah.
So you will see we have a lot of ideas because I think because our team are well connected, I think we will bring more and more value. So on the left side, you see Neoload. That's the Neoload dashboard. And you can see that we are getting back Dynatrace metrics there. And on the right side, you see the various things that we're creating in Dynatrace. So on the top, you see here it's the traffic. So you can see that the traffic has been renamed. So if we don't see it very well here, but you see that there's add item to cart, which is the user. And then there's a transaction add item, and then there's a request. So here you can see it's been renamed. Then, and then you have, of course, the events, the URL, the test, and so on, the link to our report. And we are also pushing metrics to Dynatrace. So why are we pushing metrics, by the way? Because Dynatrace is doing everything. We are pushing the metrics that are missing. So Dynatrace doesn't know how many users we are generating, the hit per seconds, the throughput, the success rate, whatever. Those things are we are pushing it back. So then you have a complete vision on what is going on in your test. All right, I think it's good to share slides, but it's better to show things.
Exactly. So demo number one, I think you wanted to quickly explain the architecture before you switch over.
Yes, correct. So so this is the new platform of Neoload. So Neoload, since 2 years, we are transforming our solution. So we come from a GUI-based client that you install on Linux, Mac, or Solaris, or whatever. We moved it to a web. So the designing your test cases, you'll need this tool. The tool is called the controller, Neoload controller, but it's going to slightly move to be a studio, a designer. So you will create your test there, the recordings. But then when you're going to run a test, you're going to utilize the central component in the middle called Neoload Web. That's a web-based solution. It manages your licenses, your tests, your team, your everything, in fact. And also, if you have any Kubernetes cluster, either on-prem or if you have Amazon or Azure and you have a cluster there, and you can connect it to Neoload Web, and Neoload Web will manage or automatically the infrastructure required for a test. So what that means that for every test that we launch, Neoload reach out to your cluster, spin up controllers, load limiters, 10, 20 machines if required, utilize it for the entire duration of the test, and then tear the components down. So the idea is, again, it's better CTO, better usage of the infrastructure. You don't no need of a tool sitting forever on the server when you just need for 1 hour just for the duration of the test. That's the idea. And more than that, I would say that we have built this product by adding one API in front of one feature. So it's similar to what Dynatrace is achieving. And the beauty of those APIs is that we can do a pretty amazing integration and stories. And I think that's the core principle of the reason why we are able to build those integrations.
Demo time, sir.
Yep, demo time. So
you go ahead and share. And as a reminder, the polling is still open if you want to answer some of the questions from this data performance report. And if you have questions, please use the question feature in Zoom. And I know some came already in on the chat. I saw that, but use that question and answer. It would be cool.
So demo time. Are we ready?
We are ready. Look at that.
all right. So maybe you're not aware, but since 7.5, there is no need of installing any plugin anymore in Neoload. All the Dynatrace integration has been embedded in our product. So first of all, this is the GUI-based product of Neoload, where you're going to design. Usually, you're going to use this product to record SAP, Citrix, or web-based application that has tons of requests. If it's a pure API testing, then there's another approach. I will show it on the second demo, which is a as code approach, like Andy described. So where do I find this integration? First of all, in the preferences of Neoload, you can reach out to the general preferences of your Neoload in general, but there's also a section for the project settings. So this is in the section of Dynatrace. We have now a server URL for your tenant and the token to be able to interact with the API of Dynatrace. So it's an API token. Once you have defined that, then you can create your user path, so scenario or design, like a traditional load testing, nothing much related to Dynatrace. Then, like I discussed, like I explained, the core concept of the integration is on tag. So I have one test defined here in this project called cart load webinar. And if I click on advanced, now we have a new sections in the scenario settings called APM. In fact, we could have renamed it by Dynatrace because there's only Dynatrace that had this concept. But this is where you're going to place all your list of tags that you need. And this is where you're going to add all the different rules related to your anomaly detection rules. So metric ID, operator above or below, value, and the type of problems, performance, infrastructure, and others. I just want to run some tests before the demo so we can jump to Dynatrace. But one thing, what I like now in Neoload in the design, so now Dynatrace has become an official monitor. So if I click here on configure counter, in fact, now Neoload reached out to Dynatrace and says, hey, I have a calc service here, and I want to monitor a specific technology, some GVM data or Hadoop or whatever. So you can basically browse the entire metric that are exposed by Dynatrace. We show it, and then you can select them. So there's no, when you click on this pop-up, there's no notion of specificity of your app. So you can say, I just want to have a host CPU metrics, memory metrics, and I'd like to have in the service level metrics, I need to have a couple of days. So you select the type of metrics you'd like to have, but then those will be pretty much related to your tags that you have defined in your test. So here it's going to be very generic. Say, I want to have GVM metrics on my service. I want to have container metrics on the service. Whatever the service is, I just need that type of metrics. And then because you have placed tags, then we're going to collect those specifically to these services that are related to your test. So now I can obviously I can show you metric the report here. But again, this tool is going to be more like a designer. So let's jump directly to the web, to Neoload web. So here it's the web dashboard. And as you can see here, this is, I just run my Konakart test, which is here. I can click on it. I can have core Neoload metrics as usual, and then I can jump to the dashboard if I want. So in the dashboard, I can have traditional Neoload metrics, but if I select here monitor, you will see that I have controller host that has the Dynatrace integration. And you can see here that Neoload has only selected services related to Konakart. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Tomcat. This is the default Tomcat page. I have the database. I didn't even specify that I want to monitor the database. Neoload has picked it naturally because it's a dependency. So that's, I think it is pretty awesome. So that avoids us to forget key indicators, especially when you run load test. So that's from a Neoload standpoint. Now from a Dynatrace, where should I start? Where should I look? So let me first look at the last 1 hour, and I'm going to look at transaction services, or I can search for my service by tag. So say I want environment all, and this is my Connect Cards app. So if I click on it, one thing that I can see here, you can see that there is only the tag. So one thing I didn't tell you is that at the end of the test, once the test is finished, we are really pretty gentle with your Dynatrace users. We are cleaning up then your environment by removing those technical tags that we are placing everywhere, and all those anomaly detection rules as well. So this is pretty nice. And then, as you can see here, first of all, if I look at the service itself, I will see here the event like expected. I can click on it and jump back to the dashboard. If I want to see the traffic itself, I can click on dynamic requests, and from there, I would be able to see all the traffic that comes in Dynatrace. You can see that all the traffic that has happened the last hour is mainly requests coming from Neoload, because this is the renaming. So this is the browser user, it's the transaction called select, and then I have the URL. So if I look at it, and I know that there's one that is pretty much consuming pretty high in terms of response times, I can click on it, and I can use all those diagnosis tools like view hotspot analysis and so on. So it's pretty powerful. Just the time range is not good. So that's 2 hours, for example. So here I can see everything. So basically, because we're placing everything and we're configuring everything for you, it makes your life super easier, especially when you have to diagnose there. And last, an example of anomaly detection rules. I think I have one in the carts. I don't see it here, but I have a service that has it. But basically, I didn't create here in this example in the GUI-based any anomaly detection rules. But if you have, I have it with the other demo I'll show you later on. Last thing that I'd like to show you is going to be a key principle for the next section of our webinar, is the notion of having the Neoload metrics and being able to create a dashboard. So here, I have a specific here dimension called Neoload. You can see here, I can click on that. That will filter my metrics, and I can select from here, this drop-down list, one of the metrics that we are reporting it back, for example, the user load. So here I would be able to see the user load of the test that we just achieved. And if I want, I can pin it to a dashboard. You will see that dashboards are very important for our next session. Now you understand that there are a few things that we're doing from a Neolad standpoint and from a Dynatrace standpoint. And by having them on place, you will see it will be very helpful when you're going to start automating your tests. So that's was it for the demo, and I will show you more for the second part of this demonstration. So Andy, let's continue with the second part of the webinar then.
That's awesome. So just to recap, Dynatrace is installed, monitors your app, what you are doing. The only thing you need is a tag to the first service or application that Dynatrace has. Then you're walking the whole dependency tree up and down, pulling all the metrics in from the technologies or layers of the stack that you selected. There's nothing else people need to do. You really pull in the metric that is relevant for that test. At the end, you do the cleanup again because you make certain configuration changes on the fly to Dynatrace. Pretty cool. Data is available on both sides, and makes it easy to execute and analyze. Or do performance engineering and bottleneck detection. So step 2, first of all, thanks that questions are coming in. That's awesome. Step 2 is now, we just showed you how we make it easier. So the tools make it easier to create tests, to get the data into the right tool, on both sides. But basically, Henrik, what we just said is, how can we just create dashboards that contain more data? And I think what we wanted to advocate for is, it's great to have these dashboards. When I just took a sample of a dashboard that I used to build for a previous webinar, where I said, you know what, great, I have all the data in one view, but still I need to look at the data. And that's what I don't want to do. I want somebody or something, automation, to look at this data for me, pull it out, for the time range of the test and give me an indication on, are these metrics according, are these SLIs according to my SLOs? And not only that, also do they change from build to build? And this is something we built into Captain. Captain, our open source event-driven control plane, that as one of the capabilities provides automated quality gates based on SLIs and SLOs. And if we look at the scenario, Henrik, what we had earlier, where we had a lot of time spent in manual approval, how we can change a Jenkins pipeline is we can change it in a way that when you run your tests, first of all, use the integration, because we saw that it's very beneficial that if Dynatrace knows which test transactions, which business transactions you're actually executing. We call this tagging. You're configuring this all out of the box. The reason why this is important, we can then also pull out metrics on every single test step. But then, instead of looking at dashboards or having somebody to then compare data, Captain is pulling out the data from Dynatrace and calculates a score, coming back to one of the findings from the report, that people want to score a deployment throughout the lifecycle. We do the same thing. We're scoring it and then pushing it back to the pipeline, which means we're completely automating the process of manually looking at different sets of data and figuring out if this is a good or a bad build. And I think this is important. We call it the integration works with all continuous delivery tools. We are using Jenkins today, which now brings me to the second demo. And I know we have a couple of minutes left. We want to also make sure we have time for Q&A. But the next one, Henrik, that you prepared is enable performance as a self-service with Jenkins, Neotys, Dynatrace, and Captain. And I think I have a couple of slides that explain your scenario. So you need to let me know when to click.
Yeah, click click here, everything. So basically there's a big server in Amazon where I have Jenkins installed there. All the project is referring to a public repo. It's on GitHub called the Neotys DevOps demo. You will see that it's, I'll explain the application itself. It's a microservices application. So there are specific pipelines for dev, testing mainly the APIs. And then there's a pipeline where you test the end-to-end application. So it's, I'll explain that. Of course, Neoload is involved, Dynatrace is involved, and we just recently add Captain. So there's a separate small instance where we installed a small flavor of Kubernetes called K3S with Captain. So it's, and by the way, there's a repo to install it very easily if you want to use it. So no need of expertise. Everything has been already prepackaged by the Dynatrace team and the partners. So this is the app. It's the sock shop. So there is basically a front services. So front, in fact, the pipeline that I will have a front end would be mainly the staging, where we assemble all those microservices. And then we have specific services for every part of the app. So catalog has a database, order has its own database. So every small service has its own database. In the process of the pipeline, it's very simple in Jenkins. So first we get the source code coming from this GitHub repo. We build the service by compiling and building the binaries out. And then we are building the underlying containers. So here it's the example of the carts component. Once it's been built, the new version of the container, we push it to Docker Hub. And once it's been pushed, we can deploy the service with the help of, here in our example, we use Docker. And then we start the testing phase where we deploy Neoload and load Neoload infrastructure. We are running tests, so and the Dynatrace integration is enabled. And once the test has been finished, we are utilizing Captain just for the quality gate. And we are using for that a library that has been available through the Captain community. It's the Jenkins library. So there's already some predefined functions for you that makes your life easier if you want to replicate what we just did here today in Andreas' webinar. So that's the context. So let me jump it to the demo itself. And up. All right. So I'm going to share my screen up. So first is, so I just launched one build on the cards component. So what do we have in our IDE, in our pipeline? So here I have this is basically a project here I use IntelliJ in my case. So here is all those various components and pipelines, and every component has its own Jenkins file. So this is the pipeline I referred. As you mentioned, here we're using the library that is available. So it's pretty awesome. There's a couple of functions that makes your life easier if you want to utilize a Captain within your pipelines. And those several components are, a few of them are in this demo app are based in Java, others in Go language. So the here in this story is that the Java is utilizing the JUnit library that we have. So the load here as a unit test, I have already some the test cases based built in Java, and then we can utilize the integration simply by passing some arguments to Maven, and that will enable automatically the Dynatrace integration. What about the YAML? The YAML, very simple. I have an example here. So I have a Neoload folder with only a YAML file. Since it's been productized, that's a great news. The Dynatrace integration now in our YAML description language, we have added some settings related to Dynatrace, so project settings. Here you can enable your integration. You can specify your Dynatrace URL, your token. And for each test that you have in Neoload, so in our case it's scenarios, there is a specific sections that you can add with the APM settings, where here I am defining some anomaly detection roles and also the tag that I'm going to use. So that's basically fairly simple. And then how can I define the SLO? So we mentioned with Andy that we're going to use Captain to validate our build. So to do that, because Dynatrace has the Neoload metrics, then the only thing that we have to do, and this is purely magical, this is since the last release of Captain, I really like that. It's the fact that you can create a project. So here I have a dashboard named, here I'm going to open it, it will be easier to show you. So we have a specific dashboard name for our validation. And in that dashboard, we are going to build them just for reporting purposes, but also to define our SLOs. You can see here, it's Captain, Quality Gate, Project. So this is more technical for the project in Captain, and the service, the stage that we manage in Captain. And then here, I am defining all the various SLO and SLIs that I'd like to measure, and I can define the objectives that would be in front of that. So you can see here for each individual request, individual request for each individual SLI, graph. You can see that we have named and defined what is the past warning thresholds that you would like to apply when Captain is going to invite the build. So here, if I jump back to the ID, and especially on the Jenkins file, you will see that it's very, very easy. Here, let me just jump to, I'm going to skip all the steps related to building the app and deploying the app. Here, I am initializing Captain, saying, oh, so I want to init Captain, I want to utilize Captain, and if the project doesn't exist in Captain, please create that. I want to also initialize the Dynatrace to be used as a key service to monitor. And then the step, once it's been done, then you can focus on your tests. So here I'm deploying on the fly my load testing infrastructure that we use for my tests. And later on, I'm using a recent feature that we added is the Neoload client. So with the Neoload client, I can control Neoload web very easily with any CI system. So I'm logging in and I'm uploading my project and I'm running the test. But moreover, before we start the test here, you can see that in the run test step here, I am marking the start time for Captain. So here, this is a way of saying, okay, so my test is going to start from here. And then later on, I say, now I want to evaluate my build. So here I say, okay, please send an evaluation event. So you don't have to specify any start and end time anymore because it's been done automatically through the method I just showed you before. We just put this function to wait until the evaluation has been done. And this will be the output of the results of the tests of the build. So it's pretty very well structured to make your build failed or pass depending on the results of the various SLI and SLO that you have defined. So what do we have? So here my build has been launched. So my test is probably currently running. So if I jump to Neoload, you can see that the test is obviously running on against cards. I can jump if I want in fact in the dashboard I just showed you, so we can see lively the various indicators that we have specified in our dashboards, and that specific dashboard will be used by Captain to evaluate the successful build. So here it is, and then the evaluation will be done by Captain, and Captain will keep the results of that. So here it is at 3:42. No, that was 1 hour again. You can see that there was an evaluation that has been done, and you can see that it's grabbing the various counters coming from our dashboard. So we didn't configure anything in our pipeline. It's just grab the counters, and you can see here the hit rates coming from, this is a metric coming from Neoload. Because it's in our dashboard, we have that, and you can see that now it's a warning. It's under 150, so it's a warning. And I can see all the various indicators, and you can see here everything has been showed as a heat map, or I can show it as a chart and compare specific metrics. So there is obviously a lot of great things by combining Neoload and Dynatrace, obviously, just to help you to manage your releases, but Captain will be a clear advantage to automate your decisions based on the score. So here you can see in this build we just released on the cards, we had a score of 88, and we are above our expectation. So that's why Jenkins just told us that we failed to build because Captain didn't have successful scoring. All right, so I can talk it during hours and hours, but I think we are a bit late now. So let us jump into the Q&A.
Yeah. So thank you so much. I think what you just showed, which was the stuff that gets us excited, is that the only thing you need to do is you need to create a dashboard that contains the SLIs and SLOs that are relevant for your application, for your service, for your project, including test metrics from Neoload, Dynatrace metrics from your system. Dynatrace obviously also captures full stack information, put everything on there. And then what Captain does, it automates the validation, looking at this dashboard and comparing the individual metrics with your, let's say, absolute SLOs or relative, because we can also compare to previous builds. Before we go into Q&A,
one thing that I'd like to add as well is today we showed the Dynatrace SLI provider, but because it's a bidirectional integration where the Dynatrace metrics will come back to Neoload as well, you can also imagine to only use the Neoload service as well. That both works because Neoload stored the Dynatrace data, you can combine Neoload SLIs and Dynatrace SLIs. But here in our example, we're using mainly the Dynatrace SLI provider, where we were asking to grab our indicators from the Dynatrace directly.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to keep up some resources here and remind people. I see some people are raising their hand. If you have a question, please either, use the question and answer capability or feature in Zoom, right? There's a Q&A feature, and please type in your question. There's a lot of people on the line, so I don't want to open up the lines for everyone. Hopefully you understand that it's easier. So please use the chat or question and answers will be my preference. Henrik, there is a question that came in from Arthur. He was asking earlier when you showed the Neoload integration and talked about the anomaly detection rules. This was defined under the monitor counters, right? So in your Dynatrace section.
No, it's because there was our first idea, but we decided not to do it because we think that you can have requirements, so anomaly detection rules that could change based on every test that you run. You can have one test with specific load that has specific rules, and then you have another test. So that's why it's going to be part of the scenario settings. So remember, scenario for us is a test. So if you click on the settings of your scenario, there is a specific tab for APM where you can define your tags that you want to use for that specific test and the rules that you want to apply.
Okay. Thanks, because then I guess I answered the question incorrectly. So thanks for correcting me, because I gave him the answer already by typing. Another question came in. I'm a Dynatrace consultant, and I have a good view about functionalities that are most frequently used in applications. I think this information in combination with these which are failing, we can create key user actions, so key services. But to create test scripts in Neoload, you need to know how the application itself is working. As a performance engineer, I don't have any functional knowledge of the application, so this is a bottleneck for me. I'm trying to involve all testers in this story, but they do not have the time for it at the moment. How do I handle this as a performance engineer? So I think if I rephrase the question, if you are invited as a performance engineer to do some performance testing and you don't have any functional knowledge about the app, it's hard to create that test. But I know that obviously there's tool support for that, but isn't that exactly what we try to change in our industry? That we don't have necessarily the need for an expert to come in, but the experts actually building self-service into the pipeline so that engineers can do it themselves.
So defining the test case itself is not part of the current story that we have, but there's an there's a project that is currently running at the moment as we speak, where we know that one of the key challenge of performance engineering is the fact that performance testing is a simulation. So if your simulation never reflects real life, then you're just losing your time. You're making the wrong conclusions out of your tests. So yes, having something that collects, analyze the traffic from your production environment and say, hey, if you want to test, you have to test this. We are working on that. There is also a common partner, Thomas Roté, that with Probit. I think I'm not sure if he still have the company running, but he was able to take advantage of the real user monitoring data, generate Selenium scripts, and then because we have the Selenium plugin, then it was generating also the load testing scripts. But be patient on that area. We know that there's a clear need to the market. So so he's not running the company anymore. Oh, that's a shame. But yeah, probably there was a pretty interesting solution. But yeah, we're looking at the solution that as of now for SAP and for web traffic. If we have quite positive outputs of that solution as of now, but stay tuned. We probably hear a bit more in the next few months from Neotys on that aspect.
Mm-hmm. Another question just comes in. You have shown you kick off your Neoload test from Jenkins, but wouldn't it also be possible that Captain can trigger that test and then does the quality gate for you?
Of course. I mean, so there's a Neoload service on Captain that is aimed to trigger tests. Mm-hmm. Tests that are stored in your source control that is used by Captain. This is there since really, I think, version 001 of Captain, and it's been maintained. We also released the SLI provider for the quality gate. But I think Captain can do everything, but because everyone is using various CI tools, if you start going to your customer saying, hey, remove GitLab or remove whatever and place Captain, sometimes it says, yeah, it's still a significant effort from our side. So you don't have to replace everything. You can basically use Captain just for the quality gate, and you will see it. You will be very, very happy with Captain because the quality gate brings a lot of value in your automation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree with you, right? The intention of Captain is not rip and replace. The intention of Captain is add additional use cases to your existing environment, and then you need to see what is the best approach. And I like it. So what you've just said is perfect answer. The next question is, what additional data can be put on this dashboard, or can any type of data be put on that dashboard for your quality gate evaluation?
It's an excellent question, and I think any metrics, I would say, that Andy, tell me if I'm wrong, but any metrics that is available in Dynatrace could be placed in your dashboards. And more than that, I really love that feature, so I'm going to promote that, is you can even add calculated fields. So say you create a calculated fields based on, from the moment there's a Neoload transaction, I want Dynatrace to calculate the number of database calls, for example, per transactions. Then you can imagine to have that as well as calculated metrics. And this, because it's part of Dynatrace, would be available, and you can add that in dashboards and put SLO and SLIs on that.
Very cool. Hey, I want to point people again to the State of Performance Engineering report. I know we ran over time. It is 7 past the hour. Hopefully, folks that have answered the polling question and see also kind of what questions are discussed in that report. Based on the polling, it seems that a lot of people, the majority has centralized, specialized quality engineering teams, but already a fifth they are doing, like a hybrid model, and we have about 10% that are handling where performance is handled by the agile teams. I think that's some interesting observations. Also, from a scale from 1 to 5, how good do you think your performance practices are? It seems that about 50% think fairly good to very good, so that's great. So we have a lot of good performance engineers on the call, or organizations that are doing performance engineering pretty well. So I think that's pretty sweet. Another question is more information on that integration between Dynatrace, Captain, and Neoload. I think the best is if you go to the Captain website or the Captain repo, search for the Neoload integration on the Captain Sandbox repo, and then Henrik, we will soon be doing another Captain webinar where we specifically highlight the integration between Captain and Neoload and kind of talk about this again. Right? I think that's important.
Yeah.
Cool. Having that said, I want to leave this with just a couple of more links, and also a reminder that Dynatrace Go is coming up in October. You have also the pack coming up, the virtual Jurassic pack, which is great. We also have Perform coming up, that big Perform in February. It's going to be virtual, but there's going to be hands-on training days. There's going to be breakouts, all the goodness. And Henrik, I'm pretty sure Neotys is also doing some more events besides PEC.
We do our user conference called the Ramp Up. I think it's going to be virtual. So stay tuned. You will hear a lot about it. But if you are in love with performance engineering, like we are, join us for the pack. It will be good. It's going to be fun.
Perfect. Cool. Hey, Henrik, thank you so much. I think it's time at the end of the day here to open up a beverage of our choice to celebrate another webinar that we did. Yes, we took more time than always because we both like to talk, but I really appreciate what we've been doing together over the last couple of years, and hopefully the audience also thinks what we are contributing to in the end helps the global performance engineering guild, so to say.
Yeah, great. Totally align with you.
Yeah. All right.
Can't wait to be able to travel and meet you, all you guys, to a local event, and of course you, Andy, and enjoy a local beer.
Yeah, but until then, stay safe, keep distance, and stay healthy. I think that's most important these days.
Yeah, sure.
All right. See you. Bye-bye. Au revoir.
Au revoir.